What's going on, guys and girls? Your favorite English teacher, Mr. Miles, giving you the tips you need to be successful in your English class. Today, we're going to talk about plot. Now, some of you guys are just starting narrative fiction, and you're not going to get very far without understanding the concept of plot. Make sure that you have out a piece of paper and a pencil so that when you get back to class, you look like a genius. Let's get into it. Okay, so a lot of you have heard this mysterious word, plot, used before whenever we teachers refer to a story or a narrative. A narrative is just a story that makes a point, okay? And in every story, there's always a plot structure. Take a look at this. What do you think this mysterious figure is? Ooh, ooh. It's a car. No, it's not a car. It's a plane. No, it's not a plane. It's a statue. No, it's not a statue. It's a plot structure. Now, I know I'm not the best artist when it comes to drawing plot structure, but in basic sense, this is the structure. However, as you get a little bit more familiar with this structure, you will start to recognize each point as a specific moment in the text. You see, authors rely on plot structures in order to correctly organize their text. Watch this. Let's begin with the exposition. The exposition is another word for introduction. It's the part of the story where we're introduced to the characters and their goals. Not only are we introduced to the characters, but we're also introduced to the setting, which is where the story takes place. Now, there are four main types of conflict. There's man versus man versus self, man versus society, and man versus nature. I'm going to explain these four types of conflict in a later video. However, it's never too late to go and check up on your internet and do a little bit of research yourself. Now, the conflict is what propels the next part of this mountain. Now, the next part of this mountain is called the rising action, and that's because it is just that. The action begins to rise because this conflict presents potential roadblocks to the protagonist of the story. Oftentimes you'll see that the conflict is brought upon by something called an antagonist, or the person who brings the conflict. Within the rising action, we start to see how this conflict is eventually going to lead to some form of disaster. However, the rising action is not where you're going to see the moment of greatest tension. That moment is reserved for the climax. Whoa! Okay, it's really not that serious. Well, in the text it is that serious because the climax is the moment of greatest tension. It's where the rubber meets the road and we start to see something so intense that the reader is caused to question whether or not the protagonist is actually going to make it through this situation. You see, in real life, we all have climaxes whenever we get to a point where we have to make a decision, whether to go forward or to give in. Oftentimes in stories, you will see a moment where the protagonist faces this antagonist head on and decides whether or not he's going to continue on his journey. Now, once we get past the climax, we start to see a lowering of tension. And that's because some of the things that are going to solve this problem are put in place. This moment is called the falling action. And that's because the action at this point is going to begin to calm down because the protagonist has begun to find his way. Therefore, the issues that the protagonist was having in the beginning of the story are now starting to dissolve. Now, after the falling action is nearly over and all of those situations have begun to become solved, We now move on to the denouement or the resolution. All of those conflicts that the protagonist had with the antagonist are now solved. And we learn a potential lesson that we could use as readers in our own everyday life. That lesson is called the theme. Now, once this theme is established, and every character has learned a particular lesson, then the author will begin to close the story. This thing wasn't all that bad, was it? You see, a plot structure is essential for relaying a message to the audience. Authors rely on the plot structure in order to keep their narratives organized. It's super important whenever you're writing as well, because you need some sort of starting point. And if you're a writer who just tends to jot down information and throw out random situations in random orders, you have to understand that your reader might not find it easy to read your narrative. So, I think the plot structure is the way to go. All right, guys, that's all I have for you today. Hopefully you took notes, because I want you to go back to class and have the information you need to be successful in your English class. But that's all I have for today. All right, guys, see you later.